Hello everybody, Natalia here. It is currently October 6th, which means we are still right at the beginning of the prep season for Nanowrimo. I typically spend all of October preparing to write my novel in November, and today I want to talk to you about the process I go through for outlining my upcoming novel. Alright, let's get started. So I believe there are two types of writers in this world. There are the pantsers, and the pantsers are people that like to just sit down and start to write. I've talked to a lot of people, and I have a few friends that are pantsers, and the way that they explain it to me is if they outline, then they feel too kind of confined when they're writing. They don't feel like they have creative freedom to just let the character speak to them. So just sitting down and writing whatever comes to mind is what works best for them. However, I have tried to pants before and it has gone horribly, so I am absolutely a plotter. I outline everything right before I even write it down. If I have ideas for scenes, I do not write those scenes until I have put them in my outline. I know where they fit in, I know why I need them, what characters are going to be involved, etc. So I absolutely need a really robust, full outline before I start to write anything. When I first started writing, back before I had finished any of my novels, I always loved to sit down and look for blogs and vlogs from other writers that taught me about their writing process, because I was obsessed with learning about other people's process, because everybody does it differently, right? So I'm just going to take you through what I do to outline my novels. Hopefully it'll help you. If not, I'm sure there's a bunch of other videos out there that you can look at and just kind of find a style that works for you. To begin with, I have been working out of this Writing Fiction for Dummies book. These books are extremely helpful. I have one that's for writing young adult fiction as well, because that's typically what I write in. And then I also have one on self-publishing, which I can probably do a video about later if anybody's interested in it. So I opened this up when I first sat down to write, because it has a chapter called Storyline and the 3-act structure. And I like to structure my novels this way. This is something that's a little bit new to me that I'm learning how to kind of incorporate into my writing, because before, when I would outline, I would just throw a bunch of scenes down, figure out how they fit, and that was good to go. But now I'm trying to work with a 3-act structure. So the way the 3-act structure works is Act 1 is the beginning of the novel. You're still in the old world with the character, and there has to be a disaster that forces them into the new world. And the way I see it is, if your character is happy and comfortable in the world they're living in, then there's no reason for them to choose to go into any other world, right? So there has to be something catastrophic that pushes them into the new world, and the new world is going to be in Act 2. So in Act 2, your character is exploring this new world, and this is where the bulk of the story happens. If you imagine cutting your story into quarters, then Act 1 is the first quarter, Act 2 is the second and third quarters, and then Act 3 is going to be the last quarter that wraps everything up. So Act 2, for me, is the very hardest to write because it's the middle, and the middle is really long, and I feel like there's a tendency for the story to kind of drag and lag, and it gets boring for the writer. So this is the area where I try to put in a lot of those scenes that give me initial inspiration. And then there's also going to be another 1 or 2 disasters in Act 2, depending on how you want to structure your novel and how long it's going to be. And that disaster pushes the character or characters into Act 3 toward the climax, the resolution, and then the wrap-up. What I did over the course of the past 2 days was I actually sat down and I wrote my outline. So here it says, where am I? So here we have Act 1, and then I've written down a bunch of ideas for scenes that build that act. And then I also have Act 2 is here, and then Act 3 is going to be over here. And you can see that these are pretty full compared to Act 1, because there is a lot that's going on in this section of the novel. And in each of these acts, I've also written down what disaster is going to push the characters into the next act. So what we're going to do here together today is I am going to write some of the main scenes down on these sticky notes, and then I'm going to put them back here on my corkboard, and that's the corkboard I'm going to be using while I'm writing in November. I also have 3 different colored sticky notes. So one will be Act 1, Act 2, and then Act 3. So let's get started. Okay, so in my Act 1, Charlotte, the main character, is content with her life. She's practicing hard for her audition to something called the Bellini Institute, which is going to be similar to Juilliard in our world. It's a very prestigious institution for studying music. So she's a violinist. She is tutoring students in violin to make a bit of extra money on the side. And walking home one afternoon in October, Charlotte hears beautiful music and is lured by a young fairy into a fairy circle and is transported into the realm of the Fae. So what's going on here in Act 1 is that, number one, Charlotte is very content with her life. She has goals and dreams that she's working toward, and she does not want to leave this world. She wants to stay right here in her comfort zone. However, this fairy that's going to lure her into a fairy circle is going to be the disaster that pushes her into the new world. Okay, so we've got this first one here. Charlotte, content with life, practicing for audition, and tutors children in violin. This is going to be the kind of foundation for the character and story. Okay, so next, Charlotte has to get lured from the mortal world into the realm of the Fae. So, let's see. Alright, so here's our first disaster, and it says, walking home in October, Charlotte is lured by a fairy playing beautiful music into a fairy ring. Enchanted by the music, Charlotte follows the fairy to the castle where she is offered bread and wine. So the way the folklore kind of goes is if you are transported into the realm of the Fae, they will offer you food and drink. And if you eat the food in the fairy realm, you will be trapped there forever. So this is why the fairies are offering Charlotte food right away when she gets there, because they want to trap her in their realm forever. Alright, so I have one last scene card for Act 1. Wow, it's getting kind of dark outside. So, the last scene card for Act 1 says, Charlotte wants to leave, but is locked away in a room in the castle. Okay, with Act 1 complete, now we have to move on to Act 2, which is pretty detailed. Look at all that. Okay, here we go. So this scene card says, ooh, it's hard to see with this color, I'm sorry. Charlotte meets the Royal Heroic Fairies. Party, party, party. So fairies love to be joyous, and they love their music and their dance and their art and their food and all of the above. So the entire reason that Charlotte was kind of lured into the realm of the Fae is to play music for the king. So she is summoned to a grand party, and the fairies, they get down. So party, party, party. So now that Charlotte has been forced into the realm of the Fae, she has to get to know this new world that she's being forced to stay in. The scene card that I just wrote is going to be incredibly important. One of the characters that you'll get to know through the novel is caught doing something that they shouldn't be, and then they have to face retribution for that. And what happens to this fairy ends up being a major disaster in Charlotte's life, and this is going to push her out of Act 2 into Act 3. Okay, now we have Act 2 all up on the board, and it's time for Act 3. In Act 3, there's going to be the rise up to the climax, and then after the climax, there'll be a bit of falling action, resolution, and then tying up any loose ends of the novel. Alright, this card says, the prince visits and gives Charlotte a book on the Winter Fae. She develops a plan. So on one of the Act 2 cards, I wrote something down about some winter fae, winter fairies that come and visit the court, and then I made a little note with stars that say this will be important later in the novel. And even though the winter fae aren't incredibly important in Act 2, they are going to become more important in Act 3. Alright, so this card here I'm not going to read to you because it gives away a lot of good information and I want you to read my book when it's done and not know what's going to happen. But this ends up being the climatic scene. So everything is kind of building toward this scene in the novel, and once this happens, then it's going to be following action, resolution, and tying up all the loose ends. So that green card that I just put up is going to be the last chapter in the novel and the resolution. And then I'm going to put up one more card that's going to end up being the epilogue. Alright, so there we have it. Remember, blue is going to be Act 1, red is Act 2, so you can see that that's much longer than the others. Green is Act 3, and then that last green card down at the bottom is going to be my epilogue. Now, as we get closer to November and I've had more time to kind of think about this outline and the plot, I might even break this board down further into more detailed sections. I might even start breaking it down into chapters because it can get so tedious. Every single chapter has to have its own kind of mini disaster. It has to have its rising action, climax, falling action, etc. So there's a lot to think about there. So what I'm going to be doing with this board in the upcoming week is actually starting to put kind of inspirational photos, quotes, stuff like that on that board. So I'm going to do an entire video about making an inspiration board for your book because I'm a very visual person. So I'm going to put photos on there of characters, settings, fairies, etc. I'll also start putting a playlist on there because I really like to write to, I can't write to lyrics, but I can write to instrumental kind of cinematic ambient music. So I'll start putting my playlist on there and just a bunch of stuff to get me really stoked about these characters and the story I'll be writing. So I know that this video was kind of quick and dirty. So I know this video wasn't incredibly detailed, but again, everybody is going to outline differently. Everybody's going to write differently. Nobody's process is going to be the same as anybody else's writing process. So hopefully this helped you and gave you an insight into how I plot my novels. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I am really, really looking forward to Nanowrimo with all of you. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.